blah 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 blah
Blah, 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 blah.
blah. Well, hello there, FC Dallas curious soccer fan. Welcome to the most current episode of Third Degree, the podcast. I think, if my mathematics are correct, this is episode 12. Hi, I'm Peter, and joining me today is none other than our driving force of awesome soccer journalism. It is Buzz Carrick, editor and founder of Third Degree and from the Dallas Morning News. Hello, Buzz.
Hello, Peter. Today I'm calling in from Spain at the U.S. U20 camp, where I'm surprised to not find any FC Dallas players.
I have a question about that later on for you.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've got an answer. Now, it is just you and me on a twosome today because did I read correctly that somehow Dan Crook has finagled a back injury into bailing out on recording the podcast?
Yeah, I think he may be a little under the influence, if I read his text correctly, and was not feeling so hot. So he's not here today, but we'll try and fill the gaps and maybe talk about English soccer.
Yeah, but I'm
for 2 seconds.
I'm calling foul here because he would be way more entertaining if he's high on some sort of muscle relaxer.
He might be even harder to understand, though.
Oh, that's a good point. We'd have to put closed captions or something on the podcast. Absolutely.
Nice.
Okay. Oh my gosh, this is a very sad episode of Third Degree, the podcast, because it marks the first episode that comes after a Luchi loss. Dallas 0, Columbus 2. It was a bit of a different look on the road against a considerably more organized and higher quality opponent this time.
Well, Columbus is certainly a pretty good team, and they like to play possession just like Dallas does, and they did a really nice job compacting the midfield too, which is obviously the way people are going to play Dallas, at least early on, since we've seen every team do that so far this season.
And it resulted in the most ridiculously boring soccer match so far of 2019.
Yeah, it was like watching a chess game. It was super slow and plodding, and both teams sort of passed the ball around trying to find a gap or wait for a mistake. But, when you play this way and the other team plays the same way, this is what you're going to get. So.
Yeah, I literally, because we were doing the radio show, so once again, I haven't been able, I had to watch the game later, and I fell asleep during the first half.
Well, that's a bad sign, but maybe you were up late.
I think, it was, I don't remember when I watched it. But anyway, I think the most noticeable thing I've had conversations with afterwards is the now clear struggle that Luchi is having in getting his team to create things offensively. And boy, the stats really prove that out, don't they?
They do. For a team to go on the road and have basically 55% possession and to have 86% accuracy, and you have some nice stats about where they all rank in terms of both possession and shots created. Only to get 8 shots out of 55% possession is not very good. And that obviously is a real problem. Luchi knows it's a real problem. He's talked to me and other media about it being a problem. He did articulate that he really liked the last 10 minutes or so when Dallas was pressing after he made some changes and got some balls into the box. But even in those cases, he talked a little bit about the difference between crossing and crossing with purpose. Like, don't just cross it. It's got to get to somebody. And that's true of the possession, too. Just holding the ball forever doesn't do any good. Possession with purpose matters. Being able to have variety and change pace matters. And they worked on that kind of thing a lot in practice this week.
Yeah, the stats that we tweeted out on Sunday or Monday really bear out a lot of this. I mean, the team is first in total passes in the league. They're second in possession. But then you start to really get into the things that tell you what that means in terms of quality. They're 16th in key passes. They are second in unsuccessful dribbles. But and then of course shots. They are 21st with 9.7 a game, and then they're 22nd with only 3 per game in shots on goal, which isn't exactly the best. And then the stat that really I think tells the biggest story about what you're seeing in these first 3 games, while they are 22nd with possession in the opponent's own third of the field, but they are first in possession with the ball in their own third of the field. And I think that's clearly what you see with this team kind of passing backwards and laterally repeatedly over and over and over without ever really getting into the other end of the attacking third of the field.
Yeah, your defenders are having a high number of touches, and your offensive players are having a low number of touches. If I remember correctly, Bocci, I think, had 26 touches last game, which got back into the idea I talked about a bunch, that his lack of production isn't just on him. He needs to make some better runs, but a lot of it is the team has to work the ball forward and get the ball to him. And I think they know this as a staff, and they talked about this stuff. And one of the things they worked on this week was some variety of build, including like a more aggressive vertical sort of build, and getting forward and getting behind the defense and getting into the box and getting in crosses that matter. So it's a work in progress. It is only 3 games into the season with a new coach and a new system. So there's no reason to panic. You can build from this going forward. Possession is good. We got places to go with it. So it's early, but it's going to be fine.
And certainly if we're going to highlight something to feel really good about is another really high quality showing from Paxton Pomykal, who, somebody on Monday or Tuesday tweeted out a video compilation of all of his touches in the game and his action, and it was really a treat to watch, just simply because there was a little bit of something across the entire field from Pax that was really enjoyable. Whether it was him grabbing the ball and going at defenders, or taking the ball off somebody's foot in his own penalty area, and everything in between, there is just so much to really like about the Homegrowns game.
Yeah, we've talked about many times with this team, in particular the last 3 or 4 years or so, and even Oscar talked about this. The difference between a good team and a great team in MLS is difference makers. It's having those guys that can take their game to the next level and do something special. And Paxton is showing that he has those qualities. Now, again, it's really early, 3 starts into his career, but he has a willingness to go at people. He has a willingness to attempt quality passes. He has a willingness to make things happen. That's super exciting if you're a fan, because those are the kinds of guys who can rise to the occasion when it really matters, we hope. I mean, we'll see when he gets there, but all the signs are there that he's going to be the difference maker for this team, and a team that right now really needs a difference maker because no one else is doing it.
Yeah, and that's really the point of concern, which is you then turn and look at all of these players that are, at least in theory, more experienced, although they're not much older than Paxton is when you really look at the age difference. But Brian Acosta, Santiago Mosquera, Badji, those guys aren't. I mean, the dearth of actually having the wherewithal to get a ball and go at people is nowhere to be found on the team outside of Pax, and then on the occasion that he actually gets in the right position where he'll do it, Barrios. And other than those 2 guys, I'm just really surprised we're not seeing more of that from people like Acosta, and specifically Mosquera, who just seems almost scared to do it anymore.
Well, Acosta, I think, just needs a little more time. I think he has the ability in his game, certainly to shoot from outside the box. He's probably the best distance shooter the team has, but I think he has the ability to make some more of those aggressive passes. But if there's nobody in the right place for him to make that pass, it is hard for him. But yes, you are correct that he does need to be better at that. And the deal with Mosquera is a little hard to put your finger on, but he definitely is not playing the way he was playing in the spring when he was a big difference maker. Luchi talked a little bit this week to me about that idea. They do want him to come inside like he's doing, because it is his best nature, his best native skill, that ability to come inside and fill that little hole and make a nice attacking move. But he's too one-dimensional with it. He's not getting the result because he's doing it every time. So what they're working with him on is if he makes that move and the ball doesn't come to him, he needs then to spin off and make different runs in behind the outside back or in behind the center back to put himself in a dangerous position where he might get the ball as a second opportunity. So, he now knows that he needs to make those alternative runs and get behind the defense some. And hopefully you'll see that translate in the next game or 2, since they've been working on it with him the last week or so.
Yep, Mosquera's game seems to be built around a pass and move mentality that seems to work in little fits and starts, but it hasn't been consistent. Barrios obviously likes to just get the ball with space in front of him and go at defenders. And it's those kind of different components that just don't seem to have gelled yet in the attack for the team. Obviously I think a little after 3 games, I'm sure Luchi is frustrated by it. But to your point, I think you're right. It's so early in the season. There's lots to be worked on. The other really highlights of the team so far, Carlos Gruezo's been fantastic this season, and I think making us all feel really proud of the fact that we all thought, you know what, that if there's a guy that can play holding mid by himself, it's Carlos, and he certainly has proved that out so far after the first 3 games.
Oh, he's been phenomenal. This is the best form he's had since he's been here in Dallas, which is not to say he's been bad when he's been in Dallas. He's been good. It's just that this performance now is so much higher than it was before. It's almost like not having a player next to him has freed him up in a way and opened him up to the idea that I got to do the whole thing. And he has stepped up and he's doing the whole thing. He's passing an extraordinary high percentage. He's having a magnificent high level of touches. He's playing great defensive ball. He had 12 recoveries last game, which was like 10 more than anybody else. It's ridiculous. So the guy's just playing phenomenal ball, and it's not a coincidence that he's back in the Ecuador side the way he's playing.
Defensively, the team obviously struggled a little bit, which is understandable considering they had to make essentially 2 full-on changes at both fullback positions with Reggie Cannon's injury. Hollingshead did not have a very good game. I think I said to you on text or something, when Steve Davis is repeatedly calling you out for bad play on the broadcast, you're probably not having a good game, because Steve, if anything, is always very kind and very conservative in his criticism of the players, and very fairly so. And so I think Ryan didn't have a great game, but overall, I still feel like this is the true strength of the team is the overall defensive play that we've seen so far.
Yeah, this team has carried over from last year with its defensive quality. I think Hollingshead might have been a little out of sorts because he honestly is not used to playing on the right, because he had like 4 or 5 times where he just ran over the ball and lost it. He definitely is passing at a slightly less percentage, 5 to 10% less than everybody else. Maybe he's just perhaps being more aggressive. But Hedges and Ziegler are in fantastic form. Hedges looks like he's really brought up his ball work, his on-the-ball passing, and his foot skill up to a level where Ziegler is, who historically has been the best passer in the back. Obviously, Pedroso getting back to full fitness and back to his late season last year form will be important. I don't think there's any question that over the back half of last season, he was a better player than Ryan Hollingshead. Right now, Ryan Hollingshead's the better player. So it's a no-brainer that he'll be in there if he's healthy. So the defensive consistency is good. Jesse's shot stopping is really good. Jesse's passing out of the back is much, much better than last year. Obviously, it's still a little bit of a weak spot for him, but he's been doing it at like an 80% clip, even once or twice against pressing teams. So, so far so good on the defense.
All right, so let's get back to the attack, because the one player we haven't really talked about this week, although we've talked about him quite a bit in the weeks prior, is Dominic Baji, who didn't have a really outstanding showing, and you and I have gone back and forth over how much of that is Dominic's fault and how much of that is just kind of a byproduct of the sputtering offense. Yeah,
I think there's no question that the times where the ball has gotten into him, he's muffed it a couple of times. He did not have a great game last game. Some of that is on him in the sense that he needs to make better runs and higher, more aggressive runs, play more like Fernando Adi and less like Mosquera. You're not Mosquera, be a high striker. But at the same time, if the ball's not getting into him and he's only got 26, 27 touches, that's just not nearly enough. He's a guy that needs, basically over the course of his career, he's needed 7 shots to score. That's more than, say, Joseph Martinez, but Joseph Martinez is perhaps the best striker we've ever seen in this league. 7 shots per goal is on par with other guys we've had in Dallas who have been in the 5, 6, 7 range. So if a guy needs 7 shots, he's got to get the ball more than 27 times to score, or he's not going to score. They've got to get the ball into him in the box in good positions, or it's just not going to happen.
So, I think the other kind of talking point that came out of the game were some of the substitutions late. Jesus Ferreira's introduction, and then lots of people were caught by how much the team seemed to change when Arangi stepped on the field. part of me wonders if that's a byproduct of trying to recover from the fact that you're down 2-0, or is that really a byproduct of that they just play better attacking-wise with Arangis? Do you have a sense of which it is?
Well, it's certainly both. At that point, Columbus is playing more conservative. But when you take off a guy who's an 8, a pure 8, and Brian Acosta, and you bring on a guy that's a pure 10, you're going to be better on the offensive end. Arangis had more crosses than the rest of the game combined from the entire team. But again, as we often talk about with Arangis, it's like no result came of it. You got to get the connection in the final third. It's not just cross in the final third. It's got to be to somebody. But it's an obvious change when you pull a guy and you end up with essentially Paxton, who's almost a hybrid 8-10, and then another 10. That's a really, really free, aggressive attacking offense. So it's not surprising that it took off when he came in.
Well, after 3 weeks, the team is perfectly even, 1-1-1, and they go into this weekend, another Saturday afternoon game. This one also back at Toyota Stadium, meaning I don't get to go again because we're doing the show. As Colorado, the Rapids come to town. Tim Howard and, of course, the return of Kellen Acosta, who, in his own weird drama, is not actually currently with the U.S. men's national team. He's stuck with his club team, the Rapids, who are having an interesting season themselves so far. I'm going to guess because Dallas is missing so many players, and we can list those off, we are in for a bit of a treat when it comes to all of those fans who are super itchy to see a homegrown laden starting 11.
Yeah, Grezzo and Acosta are both with their national teams, which really opens up the midfield. And it could have been a lot worse because Paxton, Pomykal, and Brandon Cervania both could have been with the U20s and are not. And Jesse Gonzalez is also gone, but that's an easy switch. Jimmy Maurer will be in. So midfield is now wide open. And in training this week, the obvious answer is Paxton Pomykal at this point is a lock starter. The way he's played the last 2 games, he's starting. So the other 2 positions are pretty much up for grabs. We saw 4 different players get rotations in those positions. If I had to guess, based on what I saw, based on impact over the last couple of games.
Well, wait a sec. Before you guess, let me ask the question. Are we going to get the holy trinity of FC Dallas homegrowns with Cirillo, Cervania, and Pomykal? Because I think that would just be mind-blowing to see on a starting 11 sheet.
I think that's possible, but I don't think so. Yeah, well, I feel fairly confident, actually, that Cirillo will be in there. He seems to be ahead of Cervania on the depth chart, both in his playing time and sort of in the rotations that I've seen.
Does that surprise you at all to see Cirillo have jumped Cervania a little bit?
Well, it doesn't. It doesn't because I'm really high on this kid. I think he's a phenomenal player. I think his upside is massive. I think he was one of the most ready players to come out of the academy in a couple of years. And Cervania, once he banged his knee, right at the end of spring training, that kind of dropped him down a little bit. And Cirillo has done really well with his opportunities. Now, it does surprise me in the sense that Cervania is coming off a CONCACAF Championship Best 11 performance as a 6. So I would have assumed coming into the season that if Grezzo was going to be out, Cirillo would be, not Cirillo, excuse me, I got to get these names right. Cervania would be in there as the automatic choice to replace him. But it doesn't look like that's the case. It looks like it's going to be Cirillo based on a couple of different things. The real interesting thing is that there's a pretty good chance, and I think this is what's going to happen. I think Pablo Arangis is going to start. And I say that based on the impact he's had coming off the bench the last couple games and the way he's been playing in training. Now, when I saw it this week with him in the midfield, this is actually the first time I've seen him in midfield since really, really early in spring training. It was like it went so bad the first time that I haven't seen it since. But this week they did several rotations with Arangis playing as like a pure 10 with 2 guys behind him. So the triangle in the midfield rotates a little bit, and you end up with a 6 and an 8, or maybe you want to call them 2 8s or whatever you want to call them, 2 6-8 hybrids. I think it's going to be Pomykal, and I think it's going to be Cirillo, both behind Arangis, which kind of makes it a 4-2-3-1 in a sense.
Interesting. Well, I think that a lot of people would be delighted to see the return of Arangis, and especially after the perception that he really helped affect the game last week. So maybe that wouldn't be a surprise. Although the Holy Trinity would be way cooler.
That would be fun to see, and I think there's still a shot that it might be Cervania. I just, reading between the lines of some stuff Luchi said, and basically like some of the rotations I saw, I think Cervania's on the bench as a backup who can play can play all three of those spots if it's necessary. And since you're talking about a team that has needed some offensive punch, Arangui's his offensive punch, right? I mean, this is the game, right? This is his chance to stamp himself on this team a little bit and make a case that he should be playing. So hopefully for his sake it goes well.
And since we talked about it earlier, how much longer of a rope do you think Luchi gives Baji? And starting at the top of the attack.
Well, I would have said probably 4 or 5 games, but I'm starting to think that maybe the rope is up. I'm starting to think maybe that this might be the game you see Jesus Ferreira get a shot to start. There was some definite rotations and definitely some competition happening in training this week where different guys at forward at the number 9 spot were getting opportunities based on his play off the bench, based on the fact you're playing a Colorado team that's let in 6 goals in 3 games, not a super great team. You're playing some young guys anyway, so maybe this is your chance to do some good things. And he is a guy that works well in combo with other players who likes to play a little 1-2s. He is a guy who has taken those chances as a goal poacher and gotten in the box and knocked those goals in. Mostly in training and mostly for the North Texas side so far, but I just have a gut feeling that maybe the rope's going to get pulled, and when you're looking to elevate your team offensively and it's been stagnant for 3 games, why not do it when you're already playing some other young guys? Why not get a whole bunch of young guys in there and see if they can feed off each other?
And how do you feel? How did it transpire that Pax and Cervania did not end up getting called up?
Well, I asked Luchi Gonzalez about that, and he said that he talks to Ramos quite often, and they have an open conversation about those 3 guys in particular. And essentially, the conversation is that each one of them is a case-by-case basis. And when it comes to the World Cup itself, they will support any call-up that Ramos wants to make, even if it means losing a starter like Paxton. For the World Cup, that's different. But when they were talking about a late last second camp of maybe looking at a couple of fringe guys, they kind of, between the 2 of them, discussed it a little bit and decided that Paxton starting is better for him to be in MLS and starting than it would be to go to a camp and play a couple of, friendlies. Ferreira, who's been in consideration, I don't know where he is with his citizenship, so it may be with him as much as a question of he's not eligible yet as anything, so they may not be looking at him quite as much, but Cervania was the one that was probably the most sort of 50-50, like should we let him go or let him not go. And basically when they lost both Grezzo and Acosta, it's like the opportunity for Cervania to either play or to be on the bench and perhaps come into a game was just, or even in training, just being one of the main guys in training all week. That opportunity was too big to let him go to the U20 team at this stage.
And then jumping back up top, because I know people are still asking the question, what is the status of Andresnik, the Cobra? Did he play with North Texas last week? Is he playing at all? Is this an injury situation? Is there any clarity what's going on with this guy?
Well, North Texas didn't have an official scrimmage that I was aware of. Sometimes they have some against their academies that, we don't know about, but he's training full-time with the first team. He's not doing any kind of injury rehab type work that I've seen. You can make the case, I guess, that coming off of what we think is an Achilles injury, that maybe he's still recovering. But I honestly I don't mean to pile on the guy. I just don't think that he's good enough. He doesn't have a burst that can run by somebody. He's quick enough over like 5 yards or so, but he's not going to run past people like a Barrios or a Baji does. His feet aren't good enough that he's going to play like these little ping 1-2 passes or anything. So I just don't think, for me right now, and maybe with some more recovery he'll be better, but right now he's just not good enough. He's not beating out Jesus Ferreira in training. He's not beating out Dom Baji in training.
Yeah, I read
if you're not doing that, you're not going to play.
Yeah, I read in one of your posts earlier this week, you had a quote from Luchi about Odroznik that I felt like that if we went back and dug through the files, I'm 99% sure we could find almost a word-for-word quote from Oscar Pereira about Christian Coleman that would match that thing up almost perfectly.
Yeah, the one about how his attitude is fantastic and he works really hard and how they're going to support him 100% and all that kind of stuff. It is the same situation, basically. It's like the guy is a tremendous asset in the locker room. He's a great teammate. Everybody likes him. He works his tail off. There's no question about that. But it's like, in the end, you got to get somebody on the field who's going to score. And it's like, if you don't feel like he's going to do that, it's like he's not going to play.
Well, now they've got 2 number 9s that are super awesome in the locker room. Neither one of them can score worth a damn. All right, kick ass. All right, so let's talk. Since we are talking injuries, what is the status of Reggie Cannon, Ja'Cory Hayes, anybody else that we need to worry about in terms of injury?
Sure. Well, Reggie is back and he's trained most of this week, as far as I know, and for sure the days I was there, he went the whole session absolutely fine, no problem. He's good to go. I mean, they said last week that they could have forced it and he could have played, but it wasn't worth the risk. Ja'Cory Hayes is back outside doing like extensive hard running rehab, so he's really close to being cleared, but he was not cleared on Wednesday, and based on something Luchi said, that means that he's not eligible, at least in Luchi's mind, to play. Now, it may be that officially Hayes may be cleared to play, but Luchi was sort of saying, if you're not there on Wednesday going through the full training on Wednesday, then you're not, in his head, available for the roster on the weekend. So that's probably what we would call an unofficial rule, and maybe there are guys that wouldn't apply to, but in a case like Ja'Cory Hayes, it's like if you weren't there on Wednesday, I can't use you on Saturday. So regardless of what his official status is, don't look for Ja'Cory Hayes on Saturday. Ryan Hollingshead stepped out of training a little early on Wednesday, but Luchi says that it's just quote-unquote tightness, and it's not something they're concerned about. It's just something that he's working through, and it's like occasionally he just steps out of training. The new injury was Bresson, who basically did the same thing, stepped out of training and pointed at his hamstring. Now, he wasn't like limping or grasping it or writhing in pain or anything, and I've not heard any official report from the team since then. So that may be one of those just like, I got a little tightness, I'm going to stop today, because it's, if you've ever played, the difference between, oops, my leg's a little tight, and, oh, it actually hurts. It's a little thing that sometimes you just go through, and if you just take it easy for a day or two, then you'll be fine. So no official word on him yet, but he wasn't going to start anyway. The biggest impact that will have would be who travels and who's on the bench, and that'll tell us a little more about whether that's an actual real injury or not. Not that he would have traveled, but Ematu Omasi appears to be hurt more than we thought. He actually had an MRI on his back, and they've got him on some sort of rehab regimen. And then, of course, Coleman and Francis Atuahene are out long-term and will be out long-term. I think that's pretty much – oh, Callum Montgomery is back from his high ankle sprain, and he's basically cemented himself as the other second-choice center back along with Bresson.
Okay. Colorado comes to town with Kellen Acosta with a winless season. They have drawn 2 games at home against Portland. Then they went to Seattle and got pounded by the Sounders 2-0. But they got an impressive, against a pretty solid and highly thought of Kansas City team, 1-1 draw in Denver last week. They've been kind of goofing around with different formations. They played Kellen out on the left in a 4-4-2 a couple of weeks ago, it looks like. Anything in particular about Colorado that frightens you or looks as a really good opportunity for Dallas to take advantage of?
Well, they do play, I think, a 4-4-2. And certainly that's probably what Dallas will be expecting them to play. I don't think they're a great road team, but this is a chance when you're at home, any home game, it was a chance to put on a good performance and bring out your best team. But when you have a bunch of young guys, going up against an opponent early in the season that may not be one of the better teams in the league, this is a chance to get some good things going and get some good, young, exciting players in an attacking sort of mode. So it'll be fun to see it happen. I mean, the midfields are going to know each other. Well, at least Callum will. You're going to see 2 or 3 young guys going up against a dude that was basically their homegrown mentor, in the other team. Now, whether he plays in the middle or not is a good question, but that Colorado team for me is a very sort of basic, direct, simple 4-4-2 kind of team, which is about like a 20-year-old formation. that really people hardly uses anymore. But it'll be fun to see how it works. It'll be fun to see Dallas try and attack that with their flexible 4-3-3 formation.
Well, and theoretically, with a lot of young players on the field at the same time, I keep asking the question, when are we going to see Thomas Roberts? But if we ever are going to see Thomas Roberts, this may be the weekend we get a few minutes out of the kid.
Yeah, I'm expecting him to be on the bench, and I would expect this would be a game where he would have a chance to come in. Obviously, that's going to depend a lot on how the game's going, but this is a chance for him. I don't think he's in the mix to start, certainly, but Thomas Roberts, his biggest weakness right now is what should I call this? I should say wisdom about the game. Like, recognize the moment that you're in the sense of, like, feel the pressure coming and know where you are on the field. And maybe, like, where I am on the field is now a good time to play simple and just keep possession and go back to my defense rather than trying to make a great move or a great pass. Some sort of awareness of the flow of the game and not making a mistake in a bad area. Because young kids do make mistakes. You can't blame them for trying to push the ball and be aggressive. It's just when to do it and when not to do it is probably what he's still learning at this point.
All right, so Dallas and Colorado, 4:30 this weekend. I think the game is on Unimos. Am I correct? I think it's a national game.
That sounds right.
I'm 99% sure that's correct. That's at 4:30 at Toyota Stadium. This is also the weekend that Landon Donovan rolls into town with the San Diego Sockers and plays against the Sidekicks in Allen. And that game's on Sunday, correct?
It is on Sunday, and there's also a North Texas game after the FC Dallas game. So.
Is that an official game? Is that their first official game of the year?
No, it's their last scrimmage against SMU. This is their last tune-up game where hopefully you'll see as close to whatever they're going to play opening day as possible.
And correct me if I'm wrong, because you did a little goofy teaser entertainment thing about trying to guess what the North Texas kits would look like. When will we see those unveiled?
Well, there was a chance it was going to be this week, I think, but almost certainly it'll be next week. I mean, they're playing the week after the next weekend, so you'd think it would be next week. I do know that there's not going to be like a big event. They're just going to release it online, but you know how we are about kits around here, so it's going to be fun to see that actually come out. There'll be two of them, at a primary and away. It'll be exciting, and given the fact that all four people that contributed to our little fun project came up with the same core / concept from their logo, I really hope they do that, or we're all going to look silly.
Well, I'm still miffed at you because I submitted my my prediction and you rejected it because you thought it was a joke.
Well, it is a joke. I mean, I think your country western shirt is funny, and I thought it was funny when we did it in the first time for when we were doing the joke jerseys, but in this case, I wanted to be a little more serious.
Well, for the USL team, I meant it very seriously and honestly, and it's not my Western wear jersey. It's actually Mike Miller's, but I support him in his drawing, and I think that would have made for a kick-ass home jersey for North Texas Soccer Club. By the way, for people who are listening to the podcast that may be newer fans or younger generations or, never got to spend any time back in the original version of FC Dallas, which was the Dallas Burn that played in the Cotton Bowl, and then for that one god-awful year at Southlake, Buzz, kudos to you today. You put together a post over at thirddegree.net and the Dallas Morning News that kind of just went back in as a primer of the original starting 11 for the 1996 original Dallas Burn team. And, man, that was fun to read and going back and reading those names. And I just can't encourage people enough that if you haven't taken the time to learn your history about this club, one, Buzz is a great resource for it, but two, there are some fantastic stories and things to learn. If you really are willing to take the time, go read Buzz's post about the 1996 starting 11 and the fantastic 3-5-2 formation.
That was actually an interesting thing I learned about that season was that as much as Dave Durr loved the 3-5-2, that season they ended up having to bail on it partway through the season and go with a 4-4-2 because they lost Tom Sowen before the season started, who was a key part of their defensive plan. And when they lost him, they tried to adapt in the 3-5-2, and it wasn't really working. So partway through the season, they jettisoned that and went 4-4-2. And it ended up with some people playing in some weird spots. I mean, Mark Santel, of all people, played a lot of center back that year, which is crazy. But it was fun to dig into that lineup and dig into all the the lists of players from that season and try and figure out where everybody was playing and all that kind of stuff. And hopefully if that piece gets some traction, maybe we'll do that for some other seasons.
Yeah, out of that group, there is a national team coach, a Colombian club league coach, a beekeeper, and a U.S. federal magistrate judge.
Yeah, just to name a few.
It's just the craziest lineup for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, from the commerce end of things, Buzz, you are selling Third Degree T-shirts. You've got a nice selection to go from for there, so go get your Third Degree T-shirts. And Buzz is actually making money off those. If you want a Huntsman T-shirt, all the proceeds go to the FC Dallas Foundation, and there's another link for those, and we constantly tweet those on the Twitter. So go get yourself some Third Degree and Huntsman T-shirts. Buzz, thank you for all your knowledge and your work. We'll see what happens this week with FC Dallas, and we can even come back and talk about the results of the two U.S. men's national team games, which will feature at least one, if not more, of a couple of Dallas kids in there over the course of those two games.
Yeah, whichever way the FC Dallas game goes, it'll be fun to talk about because there's going to be so many homegrown kids on the field for this one.
For sure. Okay, thanks everybody for listening. We will talk to you next time on Third Degree, the podcast.